Okaeri! Welcome back to my channel, Made Between the Pages. My name is Taylor, and today we're going to be doing the Reading Slump book tag. I was tagged by Lena over on Sufficiently Advanced Lena. She is a wonderful channel. If you haven't subscribed to her, please do. I'll have her linked down below. Thanks for tagging me, girl. So obviously, as a community of book lovers here on BookTube, we often talk about the books that we read and how much we read and whether we had a good reading month or not. But I do think that the goal-based reading culture that a lot of us participate in on BookTube can have negative consequences sometimes, especially when you're in a reading slump. All of us know the feeling. We've got all these books we want to read on our TBR and we're genuinely excited for them, but for some reason we just can't pick any of them up. And for a period of time, reading is just not something that brings us joy in the way that it almost always does. And reading slumps can be really frustrating, especially if you make content on BookTube, because you want to have something to talk about with the community. But if you've been in, let's say, a month-long reading slump, when the time comes up for you to do, a wrap-up or a review you really wanted to post, you don't have that content available to make. And that can be really frustrating. But it's not an isolated incident. Pretty much everyone who's a reader goes through these phases. And I think it's pretty important for us to talk about those kinds of feelings, not just when we're really successful at reading. So this tag has 8 prompts asking about your personal experience with slumps, how you get out of them, what are your advice when you're in them, etc., etc. So let's just get started. Number 1, do reading slumps happen a lot to you? I wouldn't say a lot. I would say that I get slumps maybe 2 or 3 times a year on average, and the length can vary. This is my first year participating in BookTube, so I don't really have documentation of when I was going through a slump, but typically 2 or 3 times a year, my reading really slows down and I don't pick anything up for probably 2 or 3 weeks. That's kind of the average time frame. Number 2, how long was your longest reading slump? Longest? When I was in university, I was reading only for school pretty much. Only here and there for pleasure. All right, Semi, tell me how you feel. Summer in Japan is defined by cicadas, or semi, and they're out now. And they have a lot to say. So if you hear them through my open window, sorry about that, but now that it's summer in Japan, that's just the constant background noise. Anyone who lives here or has lived here will know that. There it is again, so sorry. As I was saying, in university, I pretty much read just for school. I was doing a lot of reading for school, so I didn't have a lot of time to read for fun, and I also just wasn't prioritizing reading at that time in my life. So I would pretty much consider my university years, those 4 years, a gigantic slump when it comes to reading for pleasure. Not that my school books were horrible and I didn't enjoy reading them, because I did enjoy, my school books and what I was studying, but when it comes to just reading as a hobby, I would say that entire time was pretty much a slump for me, so 3 to 4 years. Number 3, name one book that got you out of a slump. And for this one, I'm gonna go with Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. So this book I've talked about on my channel before. I am a huge Brandon Sanderson fan, and I mostly read his high fantasy and his Cosmere works. But I do want to start getting into sci-fi, so when I heard that Brandon Sanderson was releasing a young adult sci-fi, I thought, oh, what a good introduction to that genre by an author that I love. And so I bought this beautiful UK edition for my bookshelf, and I was kind of not feeling like reading when it arrived. I remember opening it and thinking oh, this is gorgeous, but I'm just not in the mood to pick it up. And that was because I wasn't picking up anything at the time. And then I just one day decided to sit down, I think it was on a weekend, and I was like, all right, well, let me just dip my toe in the water and see if Brandon Sanderson can work his magic. And best believe, Brando Sando did not let me down. I devoured this book in one day. I could not put it down. I was obsessed with it. And as you can see, if you've watched my tabbing video, I'll link that up above. Or I always say link, put a card up above. But I tabbed the crap out of this when I was reading it. And I never thought that I would enjoy reading about spaceship battles so much. But it was so amazingly written. I mean, who's surprised? It's Sanderson. But if you don't know, this book is about a young girl named Spensa who lives on an Earth-like planet, and humanity is fighting against an alien species that has been attacking them for years and years. And they live underground in order to hide from the attacks that come from space. And in this world, the pilots who fight these aliens are considered the bravest and the top of society, and she wants so badly to become a pilot. But she's living with her father's legacy, which is a negative one. Her father was a pilot, and then in the middle of a very important battle, he turned tail and ran. And this is considered the worst thing anyone can do in this society. So Spensa is kind of going against the odds to follow her dreams. And like I said, it's so good. This picked me right up out of that reading slump, and I was back to my normal self after devouring this. Although I did have a book hangover, but that's another video. Number 4, name a book that got you into a reading slump. And that's going to be The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. Now, I know a lot of people love this book, and I will admit that the ending was amazing, and I really enjoyed the reveal that came at the end of this. But the process of getting there was so tedious. I am horrible at DNFing books. If I DNF a book, I hate it, essentially, and I'm trying to get better at that. But this was an example of pushing through when I really, really shouldn't have. Like, I did not enjoy the process of figuring out the end result of this book at all. It was an audiobook, so maybe that's part of it. But I just could not keep the characters straight. There were way too many characters. There were way too many changes in timelines to keep things straight. Like, I feel like if you want to really read this book, you need to read it like 3 times to get it right. And ain't nobody got time for that. So this was just not for me. And I shouldn't have pushed through, but I did anyway. And when I read the ending, I was like, wow, that's a good ending. But now I'm exhausted. And I don't really want to consume any more stories right now. So it put me in a slump for, I would say, a couple weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, and yeah. I know Lena, actually the one who tagged me in this video, loves this book. She sings its praises all the time, so I'm sorry, girl, but it just wasn't for me. Number 5, what things do you do more when you're in a slump? So pretty much when I'm in a slump, I need to find another hobby-esque activity to fill the time that I would usually be reading, right? So my daily life doesn't change. I'm still going to the gym and doing all of that stuff. But when it comes to my downtime, I typically watch a lot more Netflix and play some video games. I'm not a huge TV person or video game person, but there are a few video games that I adore, like Tomb Raider, anything in that series, I love it. I really like Kingdom Hearts as well. So there are a couple, games that I really enjoy that I'll just dive into when I am not reading in my free time. And also Netflix, I'm not a huge show watcher, and I'm really bad at continuing through. Like, I'll find a show that I like and I'll binge season 1 and then forget it exists for like a year. So I'm really bad at that. But when I have that free time because I'm not reading, I will maybe pick up that series that I stopped watching on Netflix. So those are the two things I would say that I do more. I watch more Netflix or maybe even movies, and I play some video games. Number 6, while in a slump, do you still watch a lot of BookTube? No. When I kind of back away from book life, I back away from it kind of in all facilities. So, sorry guys, but you may notice that if I'm in a slump, I'm not commenting as much or I'm not engaging as much with BookTube. And that's because, I don't know really the reason. Maybe I feel guilty, because I'm not reading, so I don't want to be watching other people talk about reading, or maybe I just need a break from books in general. I'm not really sure. But when I back away from reading, or I feel like I can't read in my life, I really tend to back away from BookTube as well. Number 7, give one tip to get out of a slump. Now for this, I'm going to recommend manga or graphic novels. So oftentimes when we're in a slump, it's not that we don't necessarily want to consume stories. Like I said, I watch Netflix and I play video games, and these are just different mediums through which to, consume stories. So it's not that we're necessarily tired of stories, we're just kind of tired of consuming them in book form, like written book form. When we're reading a manga and when we're reading a graphic novel, we're still taking in stories, but we're taking them in through a different medium. And that can be really, really refreshing. And I find that it's kind of a reset button for me when I'm in a slump. And I don't want people to think that I think it's because it's easier to read a manga or it's easier to read a graphic novel. It's just a different way to engage. And I think that that can be really useful. If you do the same thing all day, every day, you could get tired of it. So it's good to throw in something different and, spice it up a little bit. And the last question, number 8, a good book recommendation to get you out of a slump. Now for me, while I did recommend reading manga or graphic novels as a way to get out of a slump, for me what I reach for without fail for a type of book is thriller audiobooks. I have actually read a lot of thrillers, but I've read almost none of them physically because I blow through those on audiobook when I'm feeling in a slump. Listening to a thriller audiobook is almost like watching, Criminal Minds or something like that on Netflix, for me anyway. It gives the same kind of feeling and it gets me engaged and thinking about who could be, who done it, depending on the thriller you're reading, type of thriller that you're reading. But I would say thriller audiobooks without fail get me out of reading slumps. So I don't have a specific book, but 2 books that I really enjoyed on audiobook kind of recently were The Silent Patient. I know that made its rounds on BookTube, and now no one's really talking about it now, but that was a really good audiobook. And The Whisper Man was another one. Now that one's really creepy, so just be prepared for that if you pick that up. But both of those thriller audiobooks were really fast-paced, kept me engaged, and I really think that would pull you out of a slump if you're in one. That concludes this really quick reading slump tag. I'm not going to tag anyone in particular, but if you're watching this video, consider yourself tagged. Like I said at the beginning, I think it's really important for people to talk about when you go through these reading slump times in order to kind of make it a normal thing to talk about, to make it something that no one has to feel ashamed to be going through, especially within the BookTube community where we make content about, the amount or the volume that we read. So, if you want to make this tag, please do. Let's get this conversation started. And leave a comment down below if you have any similar answers to me, if you read Skyward, if you read any of the other books I mentioned in here. Do you like thriller audiobooks as well? Let me know in the comments down below. But for now, I'm gonna head out. Jenny.